I just want to make a little response to this whole antinatalism thing. I did one before, but I got a few things to discuss further. It seems like this whole debate makes me want to talk more and more about it because Professor Anton keeps talking about it, as does Conference Report keeps talking about it also. But Professor Anton was talking about this whole idea of better to have not been, and this whole is life worth living thing. The reason antinatalism is a wrong philosophy is because lives are equal to another. My life is basically equal to yours. We're both lives that came out the same way. We created, the same way. So I don't understand how people can think, how antinatalists can think that if you're an antinatalist, I can't understand why you think you are better. Like, why you think that that your life is not equal to another one's life. Because basically what you're saying when you say better to have not been, because life is not worth living, apparently, you're saying that my life is better, my life is worth more than yours, than the potential life. Therefore, it is my choice to prevent any other children from being made. It's wrong to think that one life can choose whether or not more lives are to occur. There are going to be a lot of lives, I think, that are, there are going to be a lot of lives, and I think antinatalists are not understanding what a life is. A life is something that is meant to occur, otherwise it would not occur. And another thing is, one life is equal to another. And if you're saying, I can choose for my potential children that your life is not worth living, therefore you are not going to be. That is false, because that's anybody saying that is that somebody saying my life has primacy over yours, and that's a fault. That's a fault. And the whole idea of better to have not been that an antinatalist would think. How can you know better to have not been? How can you, maybe your life sucks balls, but how can you know that? How can you know that? And that X amount of potential lives are not better? How can you think that maybe you have a child and that child's life will be stupendous, and awesome, even though there will be trials and tribulations in that life, the life will be overall an amazing life. You don't know what the potential amount of lives. You don't know how those lives are going to be, because those lives are only potential, they are not actual. So how can you say better to not have been? Professor Anton was saying this a little bit, but I think, and this whole thing comes down is to, and then he also said in his video, individual consumer capitalism and antinatalism, he kind of gets into comparing individualist consumer capitalism to antinatalism, how the two philosophies grow out of the same ground. I don't really want to talk about those two things, and I don't want to compare them really, but he said that the whole antinatalist and natalist debate comes down to life's experience and individual lives, no life having primacy over another. It all comes down to experience, and because there's so many lives in this world, and it all comes down to a person is a natalist or an antinatalist, or moderate in the whole debate, based on if you think that your life is worth living. But this is a false I think that the whole argument is just wrong because we're talking about potential lives here. And we're talking about deciding for these potential lives if these lives are worth living based on our life. So I'm thinking about, should I have children? Should I have kids? I haven't had those kids yet. Those kids that I might possibly choose to have are potential, they are not actual. So how can I say, no, I'm not going to have kids because their life is probably not going to be worth living because my life sucks? Or my life is not worth living. The suffering is too much and it's not worth living. It's a falsity to say that because you know nothing about the potential lives that you're talking about. So I think the whole argument is difficult to even do because I just think, because like Professor Anton said, the whole argument of antinatalism comes down to life experience. That's your life experience about whether you think life is worth living, or do you have the idea of better to not have been. It all comes down to life experience. He says that, and I think because of that, the whole argument is wrong to think about. I mean, it's probably good to think about it because it's good to think about, like, should we do endless breeding or to be a natalist, or should there be no breeding at all? What? I think it's a good thing to think about. But again, I'm gonna stick with the whole moderate thing between the debate because you cannot justify natalism. You cannot justify antinatalism. One more thing I want to talk about here. In Professor Anton's video here, there's a comment by okay. Julie Cranford says, I want to have kids, but I can't justify making a new baby when there are ones to adopt. I cannot justify making a new baby when there are ones to adopt. That is somewhat of a somewhat on the antinatalist side of things. It's somewhat on that side. Because that's not being able to justify, because that's, you can't justify whether you should make one of your potential children actual. You cannot justify that, and you also cannot justify making no kids at all, because you don't know anything about what your possible children's life will be like. You have no idea. So it all comes down to this one thing: the people whose lives are actual have no primacy over other actual lives, and they have there's no primacy of their lives over the potential lives that are to be coming or might be coming. Therefore, a life that is currently actual cannot decide for a potential life whether life is worth living or not, because the current person whose life is actual doesn't know shit about the potential life that could possibly be. So I don't know. I like the argument about between natalism and antinatalism, but I don't think either one can be justified. I mean, you can't fully justify any position, really. I mean, the thing that can be justified the most is the moderate position, but like what's his name? Julie Cranford that commented on Professor Anton's video. I want to have kids, but I cannot justify the decision to make a new baby when there are many to adopt. That is the moderate. There's the part of the whole moderate moderate part of the debate between natalism and antinatalism not being able to be justified, because a moderate claim between this debate would be for this, a moderate person such as Professor Anton or myself is not for breeding endlessly and having endless children. It's also not for having no kids at all. Therefore, you're in the middle between here, but a moderate would still maybe want to have children of their own. A moderate person on this, position on this debate would still possibly make the decision to make a new baby, rather than adopting one that already exists and already is actual. So you can't justify a whole lot here. I think the most that can be justified is a moderate position, but like I'm going to say again, Professor Anton said, the whole thing comes down to life experience. But one person's life does not have primacy over another actual or potential life. Therefore, whatever life experience one has doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything for another life. So the whole argument is just really difficult, and I think that's why people on YouTube are kind of continuing to come back to this, because it's difficult to justify your claims. It's difficult to prove your claims to be most true. It's difficult to to feel most correct about this, because there's not a fully correct stance. There's not one stance on this whole debate. There's no one stance where you can fully justify and prove yourself and be right, because you can still say, oh, but this is still. These are my thoughts. My whole belief is on this is that regardless of whatever anybody talks about, we're not going to get it. We're not going to get anywhere unless well, I don't think we're going to get anywhere. What happens happens. How about that? What kids are born, deal with it, and because we're not going to get anywhere with this argument at all. Thank you.